This is something that we see on a regular basis. We see people having problems with their legs. We see people having problems with their feet. I'm going to quickly explain to you. If you've got a notepad and pen, this will be a time for you to grab it and take some notes, because I'm going to share some stuff that you can actually use to impact positively your condition if this is you. Now, the reason why you're having pins and needles in your feet, there's a couple of reasons. If you're diabetic, of course, which you are, if you're diabetic, this could be a case of diabetic neuropathy. Now, diabetic neuropathy happens when your blood sugar remains so high, you start to lose sensation in your extremities, i.e. your toes, and maybe even your fingers. It can also affect your fingers. This is when the signals from the brain are now interfered with because of the lack of available signals and available resources to carry that signal to the relevant organ. Why does this happen? One of the key reasons that this happens is when you have a high level of carbohydrates, especially those who are diabetic. Now, take note now, diabetes is not caused by sugar. Although it's a blood sugar condition, it's not actually caused by sugar. It's actually caused by the carbs. It's actually caused by your pasta. It's caused by your rice. It's caused by your potatoes. Because these foods, in order for them to be used as energy, they need to be converted into sugar, into glucose, which is what the body will use to burn to provide you with energy. When you have high levels of these type of foods in your diet, you're going to put a huge strain on your pancreas to produce the relevant amounts or the required amounts of insulin to break down that sugar and get it into the blood, in the blood cells where it's actually required. Now, one of the main contributors to that process of making that sugar available and making that food be able to be broken down and accessible to the blood is your level of vitamins. What do I mean by level of vitamins? Every single part of your diet is meant to contain the relevant nutrients that your food requires in order for it to be broken down and then absorbed into the system. When it comes to carbohydrates, if you don't have the right amount of B vitamins are going to have a significant effect, or the lack of B vitamins can have a significant effect on your ability to control your blood sugar. 9 times out of 10, when we see a client who has blood sugar and had their blood sugar high for a long time, there are certain things that we always see on a regular day-to-day basis. And one of the key things that we see when we look at their profile, when we do their body scan, and the scan will show them what's happening with all their organs, all their vitamins, all their minerals, all their nutrients. The one thing we see more than any is that they are low in a particular vitamin called B1. B1 called thiamine. When you're low in thiamine, what's the purpose of thiamine? When you're low in thiamine, your carbohydrates that you've eaten, your potato, your rice, your yams, your pasta that you've eaten, your bread, they rely on thiamine for them to be broken down into the macromolecules in order for them to be absorbed. But when you lack thiamine, B1, the carbohydrates and the food that is not broken down will then start to accumulate in your feet. Because of gravity, it goes to the lowest part of the body and it will start to accumulate in your feet. When this bread, rice, pasta, undigested carbs starts to accumulate in your feet, it then starts to stifle the flow of oxygen to those tissues. When you start to have a lack of oxygen available because of the blood is now becoming hypoxic, which means lack of oxygen. When you start to have a reduction in oxygen supply to the tissues in those extremities, you start to experience what they call necrosis or tissue death, which means the tissues start to die out because they haven't got enough oxygen. It's like if someone puts a bag over your head, then obviously you can't breathe. So eventually you will pass out and die. So that's the same thing that's happening with those tissues in the feet and in the legs. The tissues start to die off and the skin will then start to go dark. When the skin starts to go dark, it's because you're losing pigmentation because you haven't got the relevant levels of oxygen and the cells haven't got the tools they need to breathe and regenerate themselves. When that process continues and remains unabated for a continued period of time, eventually that leg or that foot is now going to become separated from the rest of the body or separated from the rest of the flow of nutrients from the body. And when that situation remains that way, then you have a thing called gangrene. And when gangrene starts setting, that means when you're having like a level of poison, because the toxins that are building up because of the lack of oxygen are now going to turn the leg into a septic state or a poisonous state. And when it comes like that, in order for it to be prevented from spreading, that poison spreading into the body, and affecting other areas, the only option available to you is amputation. And there's so many people that are having that same demise only because of the lack of knowledge. The Bible says, my people perish because of lack of knowledge, because they don't know. What you don't know, you just don't know. If you don't know, you don't know what to do. So I'm explaining to you today the importance of understanding that your diabetes, one of the key factors that contributes to your diabetic state, is if you have a lack of B vitamins, in particular B1.